Hello there. Welcome to the Wild Bat podcast. Still trying to make hoops. Today we're going to be talking about acronyms and abbreviations. Within accounting, we use acronyms and abbreviations quite often. There is a lot of big words that we want to compress down. We're not the only industry that uses acronyms. There's many other businesses in industry, engineering. The reason we use acronyms and abbreviations, the main reason is efficiency. Having to write out the entire word or say the entire word can be very time consuming. And not only for the speaker, but also the receiver. The receiver having to listen to an entire pitch of big words. And when we can shorten things out, keep things short and sweet, we can focus on time and hence focus on money. Using acronyms and abbreviations can be seen as being more direct, to the point, and also show that you have industry knowledge and experience because you know what the acronyms are to use and which ones are common and which ones are not as common. Right, I am going to start the scanner. Alrighty, let's get into common acronyms that we're going to use. So obviously, let's look at how we would write an acronym. Acronyms are usually all uppercase. So a CCPC or a Canadian Controlled Private Corporation is an all uppercase acronym to say that is a Canadian Controlled Private Corporation. Every letter of the acronym generally follows one word. There are exceptions to the uppercase rule. Interest sometimes is a lowercase and an italics. Another use of shortening words is using an abbreviation. Unlike an acronym, you say the word out in total, but you abbreviate it when you're writing it down. MGMT, where there's an uppercase M and a GMT in lowercase, stands for management. And a corp or a Inc, this stands for incorporated, where a corp is a corporation. Now these are reasonably common use, and if you're starting out in the industry, you're going to see a lot of these acronyms being used. I would suggest making sure that you do get yourself delved in and learning some of the basic ones. Another not super common, but I believe useful use is the use of symbols. I'll show you the keyboard here for this symbol. This is a squiggly line, like that, like a wave. And the wave means to round, or and so on. So when we're trying to represent 1/3, we might go, okay, so it's 0.333 and so on, because 1/3 of 3 is going to continue on exponentially. Another way of saying profit is to use the pi symbol. Another one, a favorite one that I use, is triangle, which stands for delta, which stands for change. Other common ones, a hash sign means number. Well, numbers are also abbreviated down to just N and then one of those little circle things. Other common ones is greater than, so greater than 10, less than 10, or it could be the other way, 10 or less. Another, this is from computer coding with Java, is like 10 does not equal 11, which could be used in certain email threads or what have you. Now these are all really restricted to writing out when you're using a written communication. However, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, you know this, but not everyone knows this, and some people may disagree. Some people might notice if I wrote down, hey, the revenue revenue change is 10% increased. You might look at that and go, well, that's a little bit convoluted. I don't know what triangle means, and I don't know what that means, and what does that mean? So it really does depend on who's receiving. You've got to be very careful with acronyms. Acronyms are commonly can be applied to the financial statements. I've got these set of financial statements right here. We'll just pull out one at a time. Make it simple, not too confusing. And we'll start with the balance sheet actually. So some easy acronyms. BS, not bullshit. Balance sheet. Common when you're saying, hey, the BS is attached. Sometimes putting a slash in between also helps out if it's a major item such as a balance sheet. The year end is a YE. This section here, CA, current assets. PPE, very common acronym for property, plant, and equipment. Goodwill, sometimes GW. Same component when it comes to the liabilities and equity section. Current liabilities. Now this here is either NCL for non-current liabilities. I mean, these can also up here, non-current assets. Now these acronyms aren't super common. They have been used. It really does depend on your receiver. Obviously, if you're sending these out to a client, they may not know. If you're sending out to another accountant, they more than likely will know, but you never know. I mean, the people who work in accounting, they're a very diverse crowd. Some people, English isn't their first language. Some people have 30 years experience where they started in the 70s or whatever, and well, that doesn't make sense. 50 years ago, so regardless, they may not have seen a lot of these acronyms. Acronyms aren't super, they're not super well spread out throughout the history of accounting, I guess. Down here, share capital never really has one, but retained earnings definitely RE. Other components of the balance sheet is certain account codes. AR for accounts receivable. Inventory is abbreviated down to INV. WIP is abbreviated out here. Coming down here, obviously AP for accounts payable. Yeah, that's how I would abbreviate out a balance sheet. Let's move over to the statement of income. Revenue isn't really abbreviated out, but it definitely is abbreviated out rather than put into an acronym. This here, cost of goods sold, GP for gross profit. These expenses abbreviated down to EXP, expense or experience. On that note that if I'm writing out an email and it says, hey, I've got, your EXP is this, I'm not talking about experience. I'm more than likely talking about expenses if I'm referring to salaries and wages and, profit margins and what have you. So it really does, the acronym will depend on what else is in the sentence and what else is in your message. Coming down here again, down to the bottom of the income statement, we're going to have a net income, referred to as NI. Another common one is we're going to try and, this one isn't really broken out that much, but we may have income before losses and taxes, earnings before taxes. these you can also structure your income statement so that there's interest here, depreciation, taxes, yeah, so and then even any amortization as well. And then you would have a section here, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. EBITDA. Sure you've heard of that one. Here's another section, statement of retained earnings. Nothing really gets abbreviated here. Div may get abbreviated down to just DIV. For loss, now loss doesn't really have an acronym as such, or a symbol. You know, profit definitely has pi if it's positive. Another common concept when you're looking at the financial statements is these brackets. Brackets mean negative. Generally, you know, earnings retained deficit would refer to here at the beginning of the year is negative $75,000. The last report we're going to look at for this example is our statement of cash flows, or CFS, cash flow statement. Not a common one, but OPEX, operating expenditure, just this part here. Investing, so this is a CapEx, generally not the sale of capital property. Now note this is just cash. I mean, CapEx can also apply to anything that's not cash related, such as if it's purchased on loan or purchased on credit, which may not fit this, may not enter here. Yeah, not really much here. Cash doesn't really have a symbol or anything. It's a small word. You know, you're not gonna cash. You know, it's 4 letters. Come on, we're not going to break that out. Alrighty. Right, looking at we'll just get looking at taxes, referring to Canadian taxes. Obviously, the Income Tax Act, or ITA, uses quite a few acronyms throughout their practice. Not limited to CCPC, but also GRIP, which we're going to see in further modules, which is General Rate Income Pool. Yeah, General Rate Income Pool. Sorry, I had to think about that. General Rate Income Pool. There's also another one, which Low Rate Income Pool, which isn't very common nowadays, but the acronym exists, and it does exist once upon a time. We have already discussed refundable dividend tax on hand. On top of that, there is eligible refundable dividend tax on hand pools, as well as a non-eligible refundable dividend tax on hand, or NERDTA. Also, when it comes to taxation, non-capital versus non-capital losses are sometimes referred to as this, rather than writing out non-capital. General taxation, GST, goods and service tax, HST, harmonized sales tax, PST, provincial sales tax. When it comes to management accounting, we do often use acronyms in order to break down certain ratios and other performance measurement tools. And AR, turnover. So actually, it's usually just AR, no brackets. But the turnover is sometimes put a slash between in order to break it out. In order to make it, in order to distinguish it, I guess. Turnover. AR days. Obviously, you're not going to you're not going to abbreviate days. If it's short, you don't need to do it. Inventory days, same thing. Another one that's common throughout the financial world, EPS, or earnings per share, or ROI, return on investment, and ROA, return on assets. What assets are we talking? It could be, generally it's total assets, but it's, it really depends. Saying ROA versus return on assets isn't going to change if it's net assets or total assets or what have you. So, now, I'm going to conclude by just stating that if you're going to use acronyms, make sure you don't overuse them. It does depend on your receiver. If your receiver is not an accountant or is not very knowledgeable with accounts, or even if they are a senior partner, they may see the overuse of acronyms in a bad light. And because they don't understand it, they may see you as just being too direct or being lazy even. So be careful how you use acronyms. What I try and do is when I write out an email, if I have to say, hey, when I have to say, okay, Doug has a CCPC, I say Doug has a Canadian controlled private corporation, and then in brackets afterwards I'll say CCPC, and for the remainder of the conversation or the email, I don't have to refer a Canadian controlled private corporation in full. I can just write an acronym because I've already defined what it is. So the person hasn't read the entire email, and they've forgotten if they see a CCPC in the email and they don't know what it is, then they should have read the entire email. That's my understanding. Once upon a time, I did get in trouble when I was learning to be an accountant. There's this company called Super Cheap Auto. I thought commonly referred to as SCA. I had a tag, a rewards voucher tag that had SCA on it, so I thought, it's a common acronym. One of our clients had a expense from this the shop, and on the query report I wrote on SCA unsure amount, $200. The client manager decided to copy paste that email and send it to their client. Their client had no idea what SCA meant. The client manager also had no idea what SCA meant, and I got the boot. In my defense, if the client manager didn't know what SCA meant, then more than likely the client would not know either, so the client manager should have just asked me. And I had no idea that the client manager would copy paste my query report. I was recently watching a podcast, one of Kerry Lutz's podcasts, and I kept talking, the BLM isn't, letting us develop land. The BLM were applying for an application to develop land. But is Black Lives Matter involved in this venture? No, it wasn't Black Lives Matter. It was the Bureau of Land Management. So I use acronyms all the time. I know I've got to be careful how I use them. During the course, you are going to see quite a lot of acronym use. I will try and keep it limited. Okay, I just wanted to kind of break up the Income Tax Act course. Join me next week where I'm going to take on Module 7, which will be talking about eligible dividends. Thank you.